the rebrand of it, speaking about that sort of West Coast phenomenon, this rebrand of Twitter to X. What's your assessment of...
It's a very weird thing to do, because I would wait until he creates the Everything app before you rebrand it.
Yeah.
That's what seems strange to me.
Bundle Neuralink and SpaceX.
Bundle payment vehicles. I mean, if he build, I'll forgive him everything if he builds in a content payment mechanism to Twitter.
How do you mean?
There is a fundamental... There are lots of holes in the ecosystem, the digital ecosystem, which haven't been plugged because they're natural monopolies, and therefore it's very difficult for them to reach critical mass as network goods unless they have monopoly status. Now, looking at the Royal Mail, which is the first real network good, the penny post, technically, not the Royal Mail, okay? The penny post was an extraordinary thing because there'd been 1 penny postal services in London for about 150 years. And this guy, Rowland Hill, with the mathematical help of Charles Babbage, i.e. the kind of inventor of the computer and one of the 10 greatest mathematicians of his time, managed to do the maths to say, actually, you can scale this up to a national and subsequently an imperial level. So there was an imperial penny post in 1910 or whatever. So
mail somebody in Australia or something.
It didn't include Australia and New Zealand. You had to pay extra for them.
But India.
But it included India. So when Ramanujan wrote to G.H. Hardy in Cambridge, he paid a penny for the letter.
Wow.
Okay? Now, the mathematics there is to say that in a network of the postal kind of network, the efficiencies in trunk routes, in other words, the cost per mile when you're transporting 50,000 letters at a time, the cost per mile is so low that all the costs basically are in collection, sortation, and then last mile delivery. So as a consequence, the distance is actually more or less irrelevant to the cost of carriage, and therefore we can have a flat rate for postage. And it required Babbage to do the maths to prove it worked. Even then, it lost money for the first few years because people weren't in the habit of writing to people 500 miles away because they didn't know anybody. Okay, right, apart from anything else.
It takes time to develop the friends.
It takes some time. It's a bit like if you own the world's first fax machine, it's not really very useful.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think there are lots of things, and I think 2 of them are a locker system for e-commerce delivery. And what the government should do is basically license a monopoly for 10 years. Say, okay, if you offer an open access locker system, we'll give you 10 to 15 years of Schumpeterian rent from your monopoly, okay? And by the way, it has to be open access so that local shops, I can ring up a local shop in Sevenoaks, okay, and say, can you drop off a copy of this book in my locker or in this locker, sometime this evening after you shut, right? Not just e-commerce, but actually all forms of local commerce and indeed peer-to-peer sending. If I want to send something to my dad, if there's a locker in his village, he's 93, I can basically pop it in my locker and it'll be sent to his. Because then you remove the last mile cost of delivery, which is causing environmental costs, it's causing transportation, congestion, and it's not ultimately scalable because, as I spoke to someone at P&G about the subscription model for things like razors, they own Gillette, right? And they said, the problem with this model is it works at a limited extent. But if we bought everything that way, our homes would turn into a delivery hub. Your house becomes the logistics hub, and every time you open the window, it's beep, 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 beep. Okay, it just doesn't make sense. At ultimate scale, it doesn't make sense.
What's this got to do with Twitter and X?
Right. Okay. So there's a similar problem, which is with micropayments for... Now, I've got a friend called Dominic Young, who's in a company called Axate, which is also looking at this problem, which is most people don't want to subscribe to most content, okay? Pay to subscribe, okay? Now, there isn't a single case. There may be one case in like Finland, okay, but that's it. There's barely a single case in the world of a tabloid newspaper making a success of the subscription model. What Twitter could do is launch a micropayment system where I keep like 20 quid on my Twitter balance. And every time I want to read an article I do subscribe to the New York Times, but I don't subscribe to the Wall Street Journal, and I'd bugger it if I'm going to subscribe to the FT, right? Because the FT, there are lots of articles in the FT I'd pay £1 to read, but I'm not paying 35 quid a month or whatever. I mean, most people claim the FT, I guess, or at least it's tax deductible. Yeah. Okay, but also the FT, there's a psychological thing going on here, which is that there are certain things in the FT which I would love to read. There's some fantastic journalists there. What's this guy called Garnish, something or other, brilliant guy. Okay. But equally, if I pay 40 quid a month for the whole of the FT or whatever it costs, that's 500 quid a year, right? Okay. Well, I feel that, 70%, 80% of that money is going to produce articles on the prospects for central banking reform in Ecuador, which are of no interest to me at all, right? I'm not sure they're that much interest to FT readers, but nonetheless, okay, I don't want to pay for the stuff I don't want. And it's a psychological thing. Even if the net value to me of each of those articles added together might add up to £20, I'm not paying for the whole thing because I feel I'm paying for a lot of value that other people are getting, but I'm not.
So if you centralize the payment ability through Twitter, you could then distribute this.
I keep my Twitter balance at 20 quid or $20, and I go, well, that FT article looks a bit interesting. I'll pay 50 cents to read that.
Yeah.
Now, you can really monetize high quality, and the same goes for video content, by the way. The same could go to musical content, okay? Although Spotify's made that work fairly well. But I think for high-quality journalism in particular, but equally tabloid journalism, the people who buy The Sun buy it in the way you buy chocolate or crisps or a packet of cigarettes, right? It's an impulse buy.
Yeah, it's next
to the till, and you go, oh, I feel like a bit of a treat. I'll buy a copy of the super soar-away Sun, and it's XP, and then you take it with you. Those same people do not want to, just as there are people who will only have pay-as-you-go mobile phones, even if they would be better off on a contract, okay? I won't buy a train season ticket because my argument is there are 2 days of the week where I don't take the standard journey. Now, I might actually save money overall on the 3 journeys I do take, but it pisses me off that I'm getting proportionately worse value than the people who travel in 5 days a week, but I'm still paying the same. So that feeling of pissed offness prevents me from subscribing to a season ticket, and it prevents me from subscribing to a lot of publications where I would give them 10 quid a month if it was pay as you go.
So would you, if you had been Elon?
Also, by the way, if I subscribe to every publication that, I think I subscribe to The Atlantic, I think I subscribe to The New Yorker, but let's add, Wired, New York Magazine, let's add
New Statesman.
Harper's, The New Statesman. Okay, I do subscribe to I write for The Spectator, so that's obviously
should have got a freebie.
Exactly, and I subscribe to The Times and The Telegraph, I think. Okay, and then I read.
You're probably accumulating what, at least a grand a year.
Well, this is the point that I've basically reached peak subscription. Okay,
subscription saturation.
So in other words, there is a limit to the number of direct debits people are prepared to have.
Yeah,
and therefore you cannot grow the market for paid high quality content or paid entertainment content.
I'll tell you what's an interesting business that I found out about recently. I think it's called Rocket Reach, and this company, they go through. Maybe you link them to your bank or something. I don't really know how it works, but they go through and they look at all of the debits that you've got that are kind of lapsed or pointless or fucking something like that, and they get rid of them. Yeah. So if you've been Elon,
by the way, I would also add legislation here, which is it is too difficult to cancel a recurring credit card payment. I was paying for Club Penguin for my kids, when I was picking them up pissed from All Bar One. At 1 o'clock in the morning, okay? I was still paying for Club Bloody Penguin. Now, I mean, I probably had a little sneaky visit to the... No, I didn't. Don't worry. I did not go on Club Penguin. The only time I went on Club Penguin as an adult is my children, when they were younger, would make me play the games to earn points to decorate their igloo.
Fantastic.
So they'd outsource to me to get me to play the games.
Dad, go to work, please, virtually.
Yeah, I wasn't doing anything else. I don't want to end up in the nonsense wing of Wakefield Prison, okay? I wasn't going on for any other purpose. Okay, right?
Fucking hell. Look, let's get back to X for me. Get back to X. If you'd been Elon, would you have waited until you were able to bundle everything underneath? Right.
Yeah, because there's too much equity in that. Everybody refers to it as Twitter brackets X.
Yeah.
There's a hell of a lot of equity in that. It made perfect sense as a name. You had a tweet.
Tons of brand
It's equity. A very, very bizarre decision of Elon's. I mean, he, undoubtedly, the most bizarre feature of Elon, okay, if I may say so, which is, if you take a comedic viewpoint, one of the great things you do, you take this sort of Darwin mentality where you look at little things and suddenly you discover these absurdities everywhere. And Elon's greatest absurdity, okay, is he's in favor of driverless cars but manned space travel. Now, I don't want to be rude, okay? What he means by manned space travel is people who have no obvious aeronautic ability should be able to project themselves as humans into space. But cars, which obviously benefit from being driven by a human, have to drive around autonomously. Now, I don't want to be rude, but isn't that the wrong way around? Okay. Shouldn't cars be driven by people and spacecraft be autonomous? I don't want to be, you know.
How much input do the humans in spacecraft have now?
None. My brother is an astrophysicist. If you want to get astronomers and astrophysicists absolutely driven to a point of apoplexy, just mention manned space travel. Okay, because they regard it as per dollar spent, an extraordinarily bad way of discovering things about the universe.
You should just be robots.
It was described by one colleague of my brother's as spending $300 million to find out how mice wank in zero G. You know, the kind of experiments you performed on manned space travel are kind of absurd compared to something like, you know, a space telescope or something of that kind.
Right.
You know, whereas if you look at what those probes do, that, you know, the non-human probes,
collect stuff, bring it back.
It's just that's just joyous. Absolutely joyous. However, I do have a colleague in the advertising industry, Trevor Beattie, whose lifetime dream has been to go into space. And I think he's done this with Virgin. I get it.
What is it now? 250 grand?
I think that was it, yeah. And and all credit to him, he's not some rich dilettante guy who decided it'd be cool. I mean, he's probably quite rich, but he's been an absolute lifetime space obsessive, literally since being a child. So it's perfectly good use of his. I can see why he does that.